Okay, class, chapter 23, Administrative Agencies, part 1. Alright, so, what is administrative law? Okay, just a very brief introduction. Up until the early part of the 20th century, almost all the laws that we needed at the federal level were made by Congress. However, as we became more industrialized, more urban, we needed more laws and more regulations, and Congress did not have the ability to do all that because of the cumbersomeness of it, and also they lacked expertise. So instead, what Congress would do in many instances was create a statute that created an agency and then authorized that agency, we use the word enabled, that agency to produce regulations which are similar to laws that had to be followed. And so, for example, the Food and Drug Administration was created and authorized to, for example, deal with adulterated food or whatever. Okay, so these agencies regulate many areas of our government, community, and business. They have personnel that are specialized in writing these regulations, in having expertise in what needs to be done, and have the time and resources to do it that Congress does not have. Okay, they exist at all levels of government. So we have it at the federal government, we have it at the state level, and we even have it at the local level. So, for example, state agencies are often similar to federal agencies. So at the federal level, we have the Environmental Protection Agency, and at the state level, they have a similar agency for state purposes. They provide a comprehensive regulatory scheme. The regulations that they pass are similar to statutes. They are laws that have to be followed, and they can only be challenged as illegal if they are unconstitutional, or if the agency has exceeded its authority that it was given by the legislative body. So, as I said, Congress passes enabling legislation, or the Georgia legislature does the same, giving it the name, the purpose, the functions, and the powers of that agency. And the agency is limited to those particular powers. The statute is called the enabling statute. You always look back to the statute to make sure that the agency is within its power and authority. Okay. So there are two types of agencies: executive agencies and independent regulatory agencies. Executive agencies include cabinet departments of the executive branch and the sub-agencies within that. They usually have a single administrator, director, or secretary who's appointed by the president to oversee that agency and can be removed by the president at any time. Independent regulatory agencies are outside the federal executive departments, and the president has less power over them. So what are the powers of the agency? Rulemaking, enforcement, and adjudication. Those are the three key things. We'll be repeating that a number of times. Rulemaking means making laws. Enforcement means enforcing those laws. And adjudication is the process of resolving conflicts between the agency and the individual affected by the agency's action. Now, one of the things with agencies is that as they've gained so much power, because so much law today has to do with agency law, is that there's been a question as to how that affects the checks and balances of that the Constitution set forth. Some have argued that agencies have become a fourth branch of government. But nevertheless, the checks and balances still remain, because if an agency takes an action, if that action is unconstitutional, the judiciary can declare that it's unconstitutional. The executive branch can refuse to enforce it, and the legislative branch can simply pass a law changing the authority of that agency or changing the action that the agency took. So we still have the checks and balances, even though we have this large bureaucracy that some call the fourth branch of government. Okay. Agencies also can issue what are called interpretive rules, which is where the agency interprets the intent of the congressional mandate as well as the regulations. It's sort of a guidance to people, and that's something else that agencies do. So the courts have determined that this action of creating agencies is constitutional under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. So the agencies tend to function independently except for what I've mentioned already. Okay. So there are executive controls and legislative controls. Congress also has the power to freeze those regulations if it so desires. And we talked about judicial control. So there's judicial control in two different ways. One is declaring that the actions of the agency were either beyond the scope of their authority based upon the enabling statute and therefore declaring them illegal, and perhaps even enjoining the agency from using them or enforcing them. Also where it's a dispute between the agency and someone that goes through the administrative law process. The courts have the power to overturn the agency's actions wherein they're acting as a judicial body. However, in most instances, before you can go to court, you have to exhaust your remedies within the agency. There are some exceptions to that, such as when the act of the agency is unconstitutional, or where exhaustion would be what we call futile. Okay, so that ends part 1 of chapter 23.